I knew I was being tested. I was 80% accurate. The New York Times has done a couple of tests where they've shown you AI pictures and video, and you determine whether it was a real photo. You need to look for sources. You need to look for more than one source. You need to ask questions. Does that make sense?
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Long Game. My guest today is Bonnie Carver, and she has 20 years experience in reputation management. She has a lot of experience on how to focus on your company and how it shows up in the world. And some of the things that I learned that I didn't even realize, but reputation is not just how you appear to your customers, but it also is how you appear to all stakeholders. So this can be employees, future employees, referrals, investors, corporate entities, and anyone that might look at you. Some of the other things that we talk about is how reputation is essentially authenticity in the moment, but you extend that over time and you get reputation. We also talk about how you can go from a baseline and measure your current reputation today and then improve it and iterate on it in a quantifiable, measurable way, as well as connecting that back to ROI for what you spend on improving your reputation. We get into a lot of different things. We obviously touch on AI. It's impossible not to. We talk about how to go through this journey of company building and why reputation matters, and a lot more. Hopefully you enjoy this episode and let me know your thoughts. Enjoy.
I'm Bonnie Carver, and I run a company called Reputation Lighthouse, and we are focused on helping organizations create and accelerate and protect their values. And we've been doing that for 20 years. In fact, this is a really great time for us to talk because this week is our 20th anniversary.
Congratulations. 20
Thank you.
years. That's I feel like in the world of startups, if you make it past, well, 1 month is one hurdle. That's just the getting started phase. And then there's the 1 year, which is, oh, I'm actually really doing this. And then there's like the 5-year mark, which is like, wow, you survived the first step. And then if you get beyond, 7 or 10 years, it's like, oh, it's a real company now. So 20 years, that's really impressive.
Yep. Each milestone has a new challenge.
Yeah, that's fair. What do you find, like year 20? What are the challenges you're facing now that are very different than the 8th year or the 4th year or the first year entrepreneur?
When we started, we had a business plan for 18 months, and that's pretty much where we started. And we had a vision for what we would look like and how many employees we would have and what our clients would be. And we were successful ahead of schedule, but we did none of that. We built the company completely different than we thought we would from the beginning. And I think the biggest thing in our space, which really started out in being brand, marketing, communication, is the industry is changing so much that in order to be a consultancy and lead your clients, you really have to reinvent yourself. The strategies and the core principles and the purpose that we've built are there, but what we offer and how we offer it has changed quite a bit. And we're seeing at year 20 a great deal of change because of AI, because of coming off of COVID, where people need to be focused and the kinds of things they need to be doing. The elevation of the need of communication and brand and reputation to sit at the C-suite and to help leaders make decisions is a lot different than it was when I first started. So there's just a constant need to update. But for us, year 20, we're very focused in change management. We're very focused in responsible AI, but with communication and brand and marketing all at the core.
Makes a lot of sense. And obviously AI is impacting everyone. There's the kind of first order change of how do I start using this? But then there's the second order of how do I not use this, or how do I use it responsibly? Like you mentioned, I think one of the things that's maybe topical and ties into reputation is we have deepfakes that are kind of really coming back into, I don't know if popularity is the right term, but we're talking a lot about deepfakes. We have the lawsuit in California regarding and using deepfakes. Where do you stand on deepfakes as being a weapon that can be used to hurt a reputation? Or maybe there's a way in which you can generate content to build your reputation, ethically using deepfake AI tech?
Well, I think the whole idea of misinformation and disinformation is a challenge. I had the opportunity to meet recently at the UN with the Undersecretary around global communication, and that was one of our topics. Was the challenges of technology and the challenges that deep fakes and um, disinformation out there can actually impact things that it really shouldn't impact and take a voice away from individuals. I think we're seeing globally outside of elections and things that are going on with elections in the U.S. You can see that there are things happening globally where people outside of the U.S. are trying to impact U.S. Thinking. And the big thing for me is how do we educate and enable people to make a decision that that is a deep fake or that that's not real. And with AI, it's getting harder and harder and harder. And people are coming down on both sides of it. I'm looking at technology to that I could use to basically take writings that I do and put it into podcast in my own voice, use that technology that would save me tons of time. And as you can see, I'm Southern and I say a lot of times, and my AI voice would not do that. So that's very positive, right? But then the other side is how do we use people's voices that we don't have the right to use, or that we're telling a story that's not a true story? And then how do we enable people to recognize that? And that's very, very hard. The New York Times has done a couple of tests where they've shown you AI pictures and video, and you determine whether it was a real photo or a AI photo or an AI video or a real video. And in June, they did the ones with photos, and I was 80% accurate. In last week,
At least today, you're 80% accurate, but the technology is also
that was
going
that was
crazy.
in June.
Yeah.
And then last week they did videos, and I was only 50% accurate.
Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy, and that's only like 3 months.
And I knew I was being tested, so I was being, I probably took 30 minutes to an hour checking it and looking at all the things, like, is anything backwards? Is that just graphics behind the model that's on the runway, or is that an AI runway? So it's just becoming more and more difficult. And I think the thing that we have to tell people, and we have to educate our stakeholders, and the thing we have to tell them is you need to look for sources. You need to look for more than one source. You need to ask questions. Does that make sense?
So when you see the Pope in like Prada or whatever that Photoshop image was, A, does that make sense? Probably not. B, are there multiple sources of it?
Right.
Well, as long as people aren't proliferating the untrue statement, then
yeah.
No.
But that's today. I mean, you could go to, Taylor Swift has endorsed me. Well, maybe probably what you ought to do is go to Taylor Swift's Instagram, and did she really endorse him? Because, or something like that. There's just multiple sources. And I was trained as a journalism public relations major, and, I couldn't turn anything in that I didn't fact check it 3 times. We're kind of back to that, right? But we need to teach our stakeholders how to do that. And they're not used to that. Like I have one source of media, I have one source of information. And a lot of times it's because we just don't have time to look at multiple sources. And there's so much noise out there. So, if you read the New York Times and and you read Forbes and you watch CNN, that might be the three places you're getting your news sources. For other people, it might be you're getting them from TikTok, or you're getting it from Reddit. And so, what are the multiple sources? And we just don't have time. We don't have time to check and stop and think.
I think one
We're
of the things
busy.
that you said that's actually interesting is, with Taylor Swift checking out her Instagram and just that concept in general of like going directly to the person, going directly to the source. Do you think social media accounts managed by the individual, whether it's X or Instagram or whatever, and TikTok, any type of social profile where you know that there's a verified person that represents that person, like, do those become even more powerful than they already are, because that's one of the few sources of truth in this world where deepfakes and parroting information that looks like it's from the real person becomes so prolific?
I think those, and not just for individuals, but for brands, as well as websites.
So like any company, and then the website that company owns as well.
Yeah, those. I mean, if we have big news as a brand, we're going to put it on our website. Now, websites are going to change. We don't know what the future of websites are, but today, looking at brands, especially if it has something to do with something that's going on between two brands or an individual brand, going to their top resources and double checking it is really a good way to find out what's actually being said. And then, I think there's a rise in, we kind of had this time, and if you look at the Edelman Trust Barometer,
What
our
is that?
the
I'm not
Edelman
familiar.
Trust Barometer is Edelman, the agency, public relations agency, on an annual basis looks at trust across the globe, and where do we as stakeholders most trust? And generally, in the last few years, the largest trust has been from your company, from your leadership. So, you're looking at, we trust the companies we work for, we trust the people we work with more than we trust government, more than we trust media, more than we trust NGBs.
So it's like the things that you have direct connection with are now becoming even more
Right,
trustworthy versus
right,
these institutions that in theory we trusted in the past, but now we trust less.
right. And so media has been way down for quite some time. Uh, but media has this opportunity to be that trusted resource again because of deepfakes, because of disinformation, as they have the opportunity to sit here and if they will go back to the journalistic standards
Two
um,
sources.
that we learned 20 years ago, if they will do that, then they become the opportunity to be another source to say, is this legit? Is this real?
That's interesting. Maybe we can derail entirely away from reputation for a moment. Do you think that the economic incentives are there for media to be able to compete? Because my biggest issue with media is that media is paid by advertising. Advertising follows eyeballs. So that's where you get kind of more sensationalism, is if you have a more extreme headline or extreme article or extreme slant one way or another, then more people are going to show up. Therefore, you have more eyeballs. Therefore, you have more advertising dollars. And so I think, at least in my opinion, that's what's eroded the reputations of these media companies. Do you think that they can restore that reputation and, bring it back to media? Like, do you think that that's a potential outcome?
I think it is, because I think brands are going to be looking for legitimate sources to sponsor. I think
Get their
sponsorship
message
dollars
out
are going
through.
to change.
Interesting.
As we have more and more disinformation and misinformation out there, and as brands are trying to build their reputation, they're not going to want to be associated with organizations that are sensationalizing information. So I think there's going to be a shift that we haven't seen in a while, because we were looking at eyeballs, we were looking at sensationalism, we were looking at who's first. Let's be the first and we'll say we're sorry later.
Yep.
We do not have that luxury in an AI world, and brands do not have that luxury to connect themselves to opportunities for eroding their value. And the more I think the more we have media outlets that are going to take a stand and say we might not be first, but we're going to be right, and we're going to have the right sources, and we're going to double check. I think brands will move in that direction because they're also looking for ways to elevate their brand in a responsible way. And how are we going to be more responsible in the way we communicate? Because the other side of it is chaos, and we're seeing that. We're seeing chaos. We're seeing hate. We're seeing things that we can't trust. We're seeing manipulation. There's other governments that have come into our social media sites and have paid organizations to create all of these social media posts that are against something that is going on politically in our environment, or to get us to be on their side, or a side that they would like for us to be on. And that's eroding value, and that's causing chaos. And brands are going to have to take a stand and lead.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's almost that, we had this first wave of internet, and so it was important to kind of extend your reputation into the digital era. And now there's been this explosion of mistrust and distrust and misinformation, or less fact-checked information. And so it kind of brings more, and then it's accelerated by AI now, right? So there's this extra emphasis returning to how do we actually get back to information we can trust, that's reputable, that's trustworthy, that I can go to and I can rely on, as it relates to companies, news, information in general, versus just, I feel like most people's opinion right now is kind of, well, can't really trust anything, so why even bother?
Right. I'll do what my neighbor says. My neighbor, I'll trust my neighbor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, whatever's close to me. So
Yeah.
talk to me. I know we talked about, reputation protection, reputation as it relates to, Taylor Swift defending against the deepfake generated support of Trump. What does it look like to build a reputation in this crazy era that we're living in?
So we look at reputation as this opportunity to build equity with your stakeholders. And there's,
And
areas.
sorry to nitpick, like, what do you mean by equity with your stakeholders?
So I get the benefit of the doubt, right?
Gotcha.
So if you think about a glass half full or a glass half empty, if over time, every time I called you because I had a problem with my phone, you helped me, and I walked away with a very good feeling that you were going to support me and make sure that my phone worked. Then one day I get a hateful person on the phone that has had a lot of people that were upset, or I don't have a good experience, or you aren't able to help me, or whatever. I still give you the benefit of the doubt, because after, 10 other times, it was a good experience. So you're doing the things that help build that trust, so that I give you the benefit of the doubt, so that I trust that your brand is doing the right things, that you're guiding, you have guiding principles that match with mine, that your values are like mine. So I'm looking at how are you going to take care of me, because it really, as a stakeholder, it's all about me, right? So how are you going to take care of me? Because if you're not going to take care of me, I'll go to somebody else. But we don't just go to somebody else immediately. We give people,
We don't know who to trust
we're
necessarily.
humans. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we've got a good relationship with you, we'll give you 2 or 3 chances. So that's what we're trying to do when you're building reputation. You're also trying to build the opportunity to know that, it's a reputable company. They do good things with their employees. They do good things in the community. They build good products, so that I'm more likely to buy from them to begin with. I'm more likely to go work for them. I'm more likely to invest in them. I'm more likely to recommend them because I have an experience that's good enough, and I feel trust and value that I'm willing to step out and say, this is a good brand.
It's really interesting that you kind of bring up the how comprehensive reputation is, because I always just think about brand reputation. Here's the company. Do I trust that they make a good product, right? Do they make a good shoe that I'm going to buy? But you're talking about it from a perspective of, are they a good employer? Are they good in, philanthropy? Are they good in product? Are they a good company to invest in? So is that how you really see reputation? It's all aspects that they can be judged, any entity can be judged on externally.
Yep. There is, I mean, I don't want to go too deep into it, but there's different elements that we look at. And so, you're not in the reputation game if your products and services don't work. I
Right,
mean,
right.
so
That's just
I mean,
baseline of like,
that's
you got, yeah,
baseline.
yeah.
That's just, but then after that, then you're looking at, well, what kind of workplace is it? What kind of corporate citizen are they? What's their governance like? What's their innovation like? What's their leadership like? What's their financials like? When you look at all that picture, and that goes completely around an organization. It's not just one thing, it's everything. So when we look at it, we have this whole formula, and we say it's your brand. It's kind of the what you live, and then we multiply. We do a math formula. We multiply it by culture, communication, and connections. So what's your culture like? How do you communicate? And how do you interact with those stakeholders that matter? And that is your living brand. And
And
that's
that's
the
like a
way.
qualitative score that you're able to
Right.
ascribe to where you are today.
Right. And that's the way you make decisions. What's our purpose? What are our people like? What will our people think if we make this decision? How many people do we have to bring along because they won't agree with this? How many people will we lose because we don't agree with this? What's our brand stand for? What's our purpose? And that becomes our living brand. And then we're going to insulate it. We're going to protect it. So we're going to do our crisis management. We're going to, build our crisis plans. We're going to do things that are going to actually build that equity with our organizations. And that becomes your reputation. Once you kind of have this living brand and you've protected it, that's your reputation. That's what we want to be known for. That's our North Star. That's what we want people, when they recommend us, for them to say. That's what we talk about when we're talking about reputation. And you really have this, we say that we're architects of corporate reputation. And that's a value. When you have that, then your value, it's a currency. I'm more likely to buy from you. I'm more likely to recommend you. I'm more likely to invest in you. All of those things, because you have a good reputation versus you have no reputation. I don't know of you. I've not heard of you, or you have a bad reputation.
How do you actually get into can you break it down for me? Just whether it's an example company you've worked with recently or a hypothetical company, where do you start, and what tactics, what steps do you actually take to start quantifying their reputation? You kind of talked about your formula, but then go about actually doing the things that you're talking about, not in the abstract, but real pragmatic steps that a company listening can maybe implement.
Yeah. So first of all, most brands, when you talk about brand, you think about them as being in the marketing department. Because
So marketing is like the external face of the company.
Marketing seems to be the external face of the organization. When we're working on building a brand or revamping a brand or looking at how likely the brand is to be driving reputation, we're taking it up a level to the senior leadership team. And we're looking at how are you impacting all of those areas. So is your products and services working? Are there challenges with your products and services? Are you a good corporate citizen? What's your corporate social responsibility? What's your ESG look like? What are all those things? Are you a good place to work? Do your employees, are they brand ambassadors? Are they happy? Are they talking about your organization? What's your leadership like? Is your leadership dynamic? Are they engaged in the community? Do you tell people what you're doing in the community? So we kind of look at all those phases, and we do that as a lot of listening. We'll listen to your stakeholders, we'll listen internally, we'll look at competitive analysis, and we'll kind of, look at net promoter scores, look at all of those things, and we'll come up with kind of where you have gaps and where you have opportunities. And then we look at, what do you want to be known for? And is your brand aligned with that? Is your organization aligned with that? So often you'll hear a brand tagline, and when you get it internally, they don't live that brand. There's a disconnect with that. It's something you just say to your customers, but internally you really don't live that. An example, not a client of ours, but an example of an organization that I think really does live that would be like Southwest Airlines. Southwest Airlines is the heart. And for years, Southwest Airlines has done a lot to make sure that their employees are delivering on that brand. So that's just an example. You'd think about Nike. Well, Nike, some people say, well, I like Nike or I don't like Nike. But Nike is a competitive brand. They're for competitors. And so if you look internally, they're a competitive brand. So the way we work, the way we do things internally is competition. We're about winning. We're about winning internally, and we're about winning externally. So that's an alignment of the brand. A lot of times you may say we're something here, and you're really not that internally. You just either haven't had a chance to catch up. You didn't build your brand that way. You didn't build your brand inclusively. You just said, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we're this? Let's just say we're this. Woo!
Right. It's great to say it. And it's actually one of the, so I think a lot about, I guess, authenticity, which maybe is the same thing. But recently I kind of came across the idea. I don't know if I found it somewhere or I just popped in my head, but that authenticity is the gap between what you say and what you do. And if you do exactly what you say, then you are 100% authentic. And then there's a spectrum. Obviously this can apply to different areas of your life. It can be how people perceive you versus what they think you do. Do you see authenticity as being the gap between action and your words? And is that the same thing as reputation, or is it different?
Reputation is a result of authenticity.
So interesting. So it's like what you're known, reflecting your interesting.
Right. So if I say I'm going to do it all the time, and I do it all the time, it's this do say. So then if I'm there and I'm, my brand says I'm going to do this, and when you interact with the brand, they actually do this, what are you going to tell people? And that's the reputation, right? If you go out to a restaurant,
over time. That's very interesting.
Go out to a restaurant, a friend says, let's go to this restaurant. It's really awesome. I've heard it's great. Da, da, da. Well, you've heard all of it. You've looked at the menu. You've got the Michelin chefs and everything. You're mouth watering. And then you go and it's not authentic. They've out-talked themselves. Or they've outgrown, they grew too fast and they couldn't keep up internally.
It's no longer that hole in the wall spot. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So they may have been authentic to begin with, but you have to continue to grow. And as you get more people interested, you have to scale. And when you scale, you've got to scale authentically, if you're going to use that word. And then when you do, then you're actually you're building on that reputation, and you're fueling it, as you will. But you also have to protect it. And protecting it could be that you're scaling and that you know that you need to do certain things as you're going along. It could also be that when there's a bad review, you're answering the bad review and you're getting down deep into why did they have a bad experience. You may be inviting them back we're really sorry you had a bad experience at our restaurant. Please come back and try us again. You're doing things proactively to insulate that brand that you've built, to make sure when you have employees that aren't delivering on the brand promise, you either train them or let them go.
How do you actually measure ROI? Because I think we can all agree that if your customers like you and they refer more business to you, that's a good thing. If your employees like you and therefore you have a good reputation and more employees show up that are higher quality, that's a good thing. And that's going to create good value for your company, better ROI, et cetera. I think the part that I would struggle with is how do you actually measure, okay, we took this action across our reputation in this silo, in the ESG and corporate governance, in the employee support, or and then in terms of our product and quality, and then that measurably resulted in some more revenue or more growth or better employees. Like, how do you actually connect and tie it out? Or is it something that's just too difficult to directly attribute, but you just need to do it anyway?
No, there's actually a scoring system. RepTrack is an organization that has a complete scoring system around those 7 dimensions, and they also look at the top RepTrack 100, which are the most reputable companies in the world, and they will align that to the stock market and to their growth, et cetera. So they can see that organizations they've got year over year over year, where organizations that have really focused on their reputation are getting return from that. When we work with clients, because we work with much smaller, we're mostly growth acceleration companies. We're looking a little more micro, and we're saying, where do you have gaps, and how can we close those gaps? And when we do, is that making an impact? Did our retention numbers go up? Did our employees stay? What are some of the other underlying things that are causing issues? Did we teach our organization? Did we become a learning organization so that we became more agile, and we were able to make decisions quickly? One thing that I think, I talk about this a lot, is are you going to step into a conversation about something that's something that's happening in the world that you feel like you should advocate for? And that's a 50-50, right? You can step out and your brand can be crucified. Yep. Or you can be quiet and your brand's crucified. Why aren't you out there? Why aren't you talking? There's a no-win situation there. We actually feel like if you know your brand, you know your stakeholders, you know what your reputation is in the marketplace, then you can make those decisions very quickly. But that has
based
to do
on what your customers are and your stakeholders, as you keep saying. Yeah.
Right. So, and I say stakeholders because it's more than just your customers. Mm-hmm. It can be your partners, it can be your employees, it's your prospects,
investors,
it's the government, it's your ambassadors. It can be the regulating bodies. It's all of that. That impact how you do business. Mm-hmm. And so it's more than just your customers. And so when you're focused on those things, that's an immediate return on investment, because you don't have to talk. You don't have to waste time. You either know you're going to step out or you don't. That our stakeholders want us to step out.
If you know what you stand for, it makes it so much easier to stand for the thing. You don't have to think about what you're supposed to do. You just do what is natural and matches your reputation and who you are.
Right. And if you want to move or change, you also know that you've got to bring your stakeholders along, or you're going to lose them. And you can decide. You could decide.
Speaking about.
Right. You could decide. Dick's Sporting Goods is a perfect example. They got rid of guns and ammunition a few years back, and a sporting goods store to do that is pretty. It's a pretty gutsy move.
Yeah.
But their brand is neighborhood sports. Their brand is youth. So they very much knew who their stakeholders were, knew that the school shootings had impacted their communities, and they made a decision. And they really didn't get, I don't think their brand hurt at all. In fact, I think their brand elevated because their stakeholders appreciated that. On the other side, Academy, which is, based in Texas at the time, very much.
What is Academy? I'm not familiar with
Academy Sporting Goods in Texas. But they're an outdoors. They're about fishing and hunting, and and you can get your soccer cleats there and other things there. But they would, that wouldn't be a good thing for them to do. They could not have made that decision because they would have taken off half of their business. It's just not what they do. They're an outdoors hunting type company. That's where you go.
It's fascinating too that it's literally the same exact sector, right? It's a large store that focuses on outdoor activities, but with a slightly different nuance. They can complete completely different actions, and it's appropriate for their reputation, for the brand, for them to be authentic to who their customers, who their stakeholders are at that present time, which maybe has shifted over the past 5, 10, 20 years.
Right. But if you know that, and if you know your customers and you're talking to them and you're listening to them, then you know how to make those kinds of decisions. One of the most fun that I watch are people who've worked in corporate and then moved to the entrepreneur side. So you've picked your you've created this entire brand in a corporate world. You were the senior VP of X or whatever, and now you've got this great idea and you're going to go start up. And you do have to, yes, the expertise and the experience that you're bringing out of the enterprise is valuable, but now why should I trust you as an entrepreneur? So you have to do some switching there. And we see that all the time. Some people do it very well. They're able to look at their expertise and their thought leadership and say, because of this and because I learned all of these things, I'm taking that into my new gig, and this is why I've done this. Some people just have a hard time working outside of that corporate world and being entrepreneurial. But it's always a fun one to watch because you do have to change your brand a little bit when you're moving in that direction. We often come into companies that are looking for some sort of transformation. The beauty is the companies that we've come into that are, funded startups that are building brands and have a vision. And you talk to the CEO and the vision is just wonderful. And then for them to trust you to help build that brand and build that company and build that culture that mirrors their vision and changes as the environment changes, as they get success, all the way to exit. And we've done that with several companies where we've been able to help them start from the very beginning to go all the way to exit and make the decisions that they needed to make along the way. And that could be 5 years, that could be 8 years, it could be 2. It depends on when we come in and what the challenge is that we're trying to help them overcome to move to that next level. Well, thank you for having me. It's been a wonderful conversation. LinkedIn's great, Bonnie Carver. I'm also on Twitter, X, sorry. I should know that. They've just moved headquarters to right down the road from me, at Bonnie Carver. And then our website is replighthouse.com. Well, thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Enjoy the weekend.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed that episode, make sure you check out this video right here. And if you really enjoyed it and you listened to the end, take 2 seconds and share the love so someone else might find it by clicking the thumbs up button and subscribing. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. But click that button.